I'm super excited to invite Jeyandran Venugopal, Chief Product and Technology Officer at Flipkart, to kickstart today's agenda. In his role as CPTO, Jay is tasked with the strengthening of our team, technology investments, and helping us implement new technologies with a focus on building future capabilities across product as well as engineering. In his 17 plus years of experience, Jay has donned various hats in the consumer internet space as a technologist across both startups as well as large companies, both in the US as well as in India. Let's hear from Jay today on trends in e-commerce. Jay, over to you to flag off the event for the day.
Thank you, Ambika. Thanks for that kind introduction and for the warm welcome. And from my side as well, very, very warm welcome from everyone here at Flipkart to all the attendees here for day 2 of the Billion AI 2021 event. You have a series of talks lined up later in this session around computer vision, NLP, and various other very, very interesting topics. This talk is going to be about a little bit about the context setting for why are we doing all that innovation? What is it all about? So when our founders, Sachin and Binny Bansal, started this e-commerce company 14 years back, little would they have imagined that we will be sitting here 14 years hence with a company now serving 300 million plus customers and is the trendsetter, which actually, in fact, had a ringside view of digital adoption in the country and in fact drove a lot of that over that decade and a half of our existence. So we have been we have had a privileged role in seeing the evolution of internet in India and also being able to innovate in context, in market for our users. And I thought I'll give you a ringside view of some of that in terms of what is e-commerce today in India about and what do we think based on our view of the metrics. We talk to users every day. We see what is happening in market. What is it going to be about in terms of the next decade of growth for e-commerce and what kind of technologies will actually power that and drive innovation for our users. So that is what this talk is going to be about. We can go to the next slide. So just to initially set context, if you look at the market size, right? So as Ambika also called out in her introduction, the India commerce market, I'm not only talking about e-commerce, the overall commerce pie of the GDP, right? Based on the consumption economy in the country is somewhere around $850 billion, right? And if you look at all players put together, e-commerce, what it was in the just concluded financial year 20, it was about $30 billion, less than 4% adoption. Right, and this year we hope to end close to $40 billion as an industry with slightly less than 5% adoption. So if you look at a lot of the other markets, we'll talk about it a bit more. You will see that because of the selection, value, convenience that e-commerce brings to the table for users, the percentage of the overall commerce pie that e-commerce generally tends to get to is easily going to be in few dozens when there is enough penetration of e-commerce among the internet user base in the country. So clearly there is huge headroom that we still have, even though e-commerce is seen as kind of the poster child of the consumer internet economy in India today. There is going to be a huge headroom for us to grow. Some very interesting trends to talk about there. We already see this, 80% of all new user growth for us actually comes from tier 2 and beyond towns. Because the metro tier 1 users were the early adopters who were the first 100 million, 150 million users that we got to. And now we are seeing that everything is about the tier 2 and beyond what we call as a middle India or Bharat user, right? And therefore, a lot of the innovations I'm going to talk about are in that context of what it would mean for serving that user base best. We can go to the next slide. So before that, if you look at comparable markets, specifically, let's say we look at China, right? So one of the very interesting things you see is that whenever there is a huge gap between the active internet users in the country and the annual active customer base for all of e-commerce as an industry put together, right? As that gap actually starts to be high, there is a lot of in-market innovation that comes into play. Of course, in China, it took the form of group buying, which PDD pioneered, and then it evolved in various different ways. There is, of course, recently what is called as Tuan Commerce, which is again a different version of group buying, which initially started with fruits and vegetables and grocery, and is scaling up quite well. And a lot of different models of commerce are like reseller commerce, social-based commerce, and live streaming commerce, right? So live streaming commerce is such a large industry in China. It literally kind of like gave birth to that new channel. And now several markets are looking at it and seeing how they can contextualize that into the Indian market, into their own markets. And similarly, that's happening in the Indian market as well, right? So in India, if you see, right, that gap is quite large. So our annual active internet user base is somewhere around 650 million users. And currently annual active customer base for digital commerce product transactors is only about 150 million or thereabouts, 140, 150 million. So that huge gap is manifesting even in our own market today. And we believe that this wave of innovation that we saw in China to start bridging the gap, which you see has happened in China, right? So it is going to happen here, even in India. Can go to the next slide. So this is just calling out that gap. In India, actually, that gap has been increasing over time, actually. So we still have only a 20% penetration in terms of the industry at large as a digital commerce industry. Product transactors are only about 20% of the overall active internet user base. So we will see a little bit more about how the user funnel looks like, right? Where are these people spending time? And then what are the barriers that are keeping them from becoming product transactors? And in that context, what is it that we as an industry are striving to do? Can go to the next slide. So this is kind of a very high level breakdown of how this math is looking like, right? So out of the user base of about 650 million users, as you can see, social media and video are the big share, take the biggest share out of that internet user base, right? So these are the first ports of call for many people who first get introduced to the internet. And of course, in India, the first access to internet for most of this new user base is actually happening on a Android phone. And now with cheap data plans in the country and phone prices actually becoming as cheap as they are, even with very, very reasonably good specs, we see that this adoption wave is happening, and social media and video are the first ports of call. And then people graduate into doing bill payments, recharges online, and so on, and maybe buy train tickets. And then eventually, it usually takes about, let's say, 18 months or thereabouts before actually they consider doing product transactions, right? So, and we will see more about what are the barriers, how can we bridge that, and how can we shorten that cycle, get them on e-commerce faster as we go further. Can go to the next slide. So they say that it takes a village to raise a child, right? So this is similar to that, right? So we have actually a ecosystem of innovations that we need to bring to play. It is not going to be in only one dimension, right? So we need to do all of these things that we'll talk about one by one for us to really bring this user the value of digital commerce and introduce to them this medium of commerce. So we'll go into each one of them and spend a couple of minutes talking through what each of these mean. Can go to the next slide. So digital ecosystems. So basically what we see is that the commerce players in the country actually have to bring to play multiple capabilities and converge them for us to be able to actually do this in a meaningful way for our users, right? So of course, e-commerce marketplaces have many times actually deeply built supply chain and logistics capabilities. In fact, at Flipkart, when we got started and started scaling, we saw that to be able to meet our users' needs in terms of speed and for us to be able to do it in a way that is cost efficient, we had to pretty much build B2C consumer supply chain and reach every pin code in the country, right? So that is an element of bringing an ecosystem of capabilities into play. Loyalty programs are another way to keep the users engaged within the set of services that you want them to actually continue consuming and using. And in India, affordability is a big theme, right? So to be able to provide users that affordability lever so that they can start improving their lifestyle, start consuming some of these products and services is going to play important part in driving adoption, right? So if you do any one of these things well and don't focus on the others, in India, that will not land, right? So of course, entertainment, in the context of what I talked about earlier, entertainment is very important as well, because that happens to be the first port of call for a lot of the users. Games, especially casual games, video, and so on, right? So how do you bring users to your platform and then eventually figure out how you can convert them to a commerce intent and all of that, right? So I won't go through every one of them. So the idea here is to just talk about how each of these capabilities have to come together to play a holistic role in making e-commerce happen in the country. You can go to the next slide. So so basically here we are talking about financial services. I talked about affordability. In India, digitization is something that we are still working on. Of course, the last few years where the government has actually also come to play, and we have interesting innovations like the Unified Payments Interface (UPI) that has taken the payments world by storm in the country, right? And in fact has leapfrogged many other developed nations even in the process of making person-to-person and person-to-merchant payments very, very easy, right? So that is an element of how financial ease of transactions and financial fintech innovations are an important part of making e-commerce happen. I won't go to every one of them, but affordability, for example, how do you make credit available for users who may not actually have a formal credit economy file, right? So for them to have been scored by credit bureaus, right? So what kind of interesting, innovative data science backed behavioral models that you can use to assess credit worthiness in the absence of a formal credit ecosystem, right? A formal credit file for the users. So these are all important elements of innovation that will make e-commerce happen. The next one. Can go to the next slide. Yeah. So the other thing that we have been investing deeply is actually into logistics capabilities, and some of these visuals here that you see are actually from one of our largest warehouses, which is a part of our two-tier network strategy for our supply chain. It's highly automated, right? So we have automated storage and retrieval systems. We have cross-belt sorters that run the entire length and width of the facility, several kilometers of these cross-belt sorters with controllers which are programmed algorithmically to send it to the right destination stations, automated packers. So this is a 5 million cubic feet storage space that is being operated with a very, very thin staff compared to what it would normally be otherwise for a regular B2C consumer warehouse. So this is yet another type of innovation that we have engaged in. You can go to the next slide. So we have also, along the same lines on the logistics front, we have also started working with drone tech. India actually in August did, so you will see the video of an actual drone pilot that we did with the Telangana government to test drone tech as a possible solution for a lot of use cases we have in mind, especially in our supply chain. In this particular pilot that we did with the Telangana government, we put together a consortium which we called as a Flipkart Air, working with drone manufacturers, startups in this space, UTM operators, and so on, to be able to deliver vaccines and deliver samples back from the primary health centers back to the central centers and all of that stuff, right? So, and this was done with temperature control being maintained, monitored throughout the flight time, beyond visual line of sight drone tech, right? So why did we do this? Of course, when COVID happened and vaccine delivery in remote places was a problem that governments were looking for a solution for, we thought that we can bring our tech capabilities to play to serve the country in a time of need. But equally, we also wanted to learn using this pilot to see how we can actually do this for our own customer use cases and in our logistics area as well. Go to the next slide. So voice and vernacular, I'll be very brief about it. So basically, the new set of internet users coming from tier 2 and beyond cities actually prefer using vernacular languages as their medium of choice when interacting with the consumer internet platform. The first 150 million users were comfortable with English as their preferred medium when using consumer platforms, but that is not going to cut it for the new user base that we are onboarding, right? So I won't repeat the stats here, but we have seen very strong adoption when we launched Flipkart in 11 regional languages in terms of user stickiness on that platform and the daily active user base that comes through the Vernacular interface for us has been increasing steadily. And we are seeing very promising results in terms of how our users are taking to that product. Similarly, voice is another important interaction medium for the new to internet users, rather than doing cumbersome typing, especially in Devanagari Lipi, right? In the script on-screen keyboards, they prefer using voice, right? So this has been proven multiple times in other products. For example, Google published reports on how their voice search has grown exponentially over the last 2 to 3 years in the India market, and we are seeing the same as well. So we are investing heavily in voice and vernacular technologies as well. Go to the next slide. So a couple of very interesting things that we're working on. You'll hear more about it as we go through it. And in fact, the decision bot is a project that came out of our Seattle R&D lab doing the heavy lifting on the data sciences on this. And a very interesting concept here to see how we can help the users contextually by using all the information available through the catalog, as well as the user-generated question answers, etc. Use an NLP engine to give contextual answers to the users rather than making them scroll through product specs and tons of questions to get answers to what they are looking for. And similarly, voice assistant, I already talked about the importance of voice. So how do we use voice even more deeply in all of our product interfaces to do searches, to do interactive digital assistants, and so on and so forth. We can go to the next slide. So I'll not spend more time on it. I already covered some of this about how we have actually really pioneered and pushed the ambit on broadening the base of vernacular reach that we have in the country. We can go to the next slide. We can go to the next slide. Yeah, so video commerce. So we actually launched our first live commerce feature on the platform just in time for our Big Billion Day event, which is our annual large sale event. And we saw some very promising result. And this is going to be a very interesting medium we will try to scale in the country. How do we use influencers, celebrities, and try to actually do content to commerce and help inspiration and discovery of products for our users. Go to the next slide, please. Can we please move to the next slide? Yeah, so social commerce again is an area which will help break the trust barrier that new to internet users have before adopting e-commerce. And this is around how do we use their trusted circles to introduce products to them and help them transact for the first time or for the first few times. And this is an area that has really blossomed over the last 2 to 3 years, where product discovery can happen elsewhere on other surfaces through trusted intermediaries who help contextual discovery for their network. And we also actually have entered this space fairly recently, and we actually launched our first product in this space called Shopsy. To do it through resellers. We'll see more about it. And again, there we are looking at products that usually have a low average selling price, but where the selection is very large, and therefore curation of that selection, when it happens through trusted sources, it actually resonates better with the users. And we also hope to be able to leverage a network of kirana shops, acting as resellers, homemakers and others actually acting as resellers. And all of that are new models of discovery, new channels of commerce that we hope to grow in the country by means of some of these experiments that we are launching and trying to scale. Can go to the next one, please. Yeah, I talked briefly about Shopsy. So basically it's just a very early days, but we have seen extremely strong growth. It's in fact exponential growth that we have seen over the last 3 to 4 months of us launching it, which gives us a lot of confidence that this experiment is going in the right direction. And we hope to be able to further invest and scale this. So I think this is my last slide. So in summary, what I would say is this as a recap, right? So India market has a lot of potential, even though the market is 14 years old as an e-commerce market, we are still barely scratching the surface of what is possible. But to bridge the gap from where we are to where we can be and where we need to be, where the penetration of the overall commerce pie can be easily 30, 35, 40% like in developed countries, and we will get there in 5 years, 10 years. But it will not happen without market-specific innovations. And a lot of those innovations have to be powered by deep data science and insights, data and analytics and insights and data science-based products that have to come to play. And you will hear more about a lot of those things in more detail as well as we go along further. And of course, our Seattle R&D lab is also in a big way playing a role in some of the innovations that we have talked about briefly here. With that, I'll close, and I hope that this gave you a ringside view of where the e-commerce market is today and where we are headed and the kind of innovations that are powering that growth. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jay, for those wonderful insights. I'm sure you've got all of our audience charged up and excited to know more about the exciting work that we are doing. Thank you very much for joining us.